This episode is brought to you by R.W. McDonald & Sons Incorporated, Robert Stevens Jewelers. Now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. For a long time, I suffered with depression and anxiety. I had tried therapy before, but struggled finding a therapist I connected with until I found BetterHelp. That's why I am so excited to share BetterHelp's mission to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, because finding a therapist can be hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online. Remote therapy sessions, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. Click the link in description and receive 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. And by clicking that link, you support this channel. Plus, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. I was struggling for a long time, and BetterHelp was where I found my therapist, Whitney, who I still see weekly for almost 2 years now. So, if you're struggling like I was, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in description or go to betterhelp.com/altereagle. That's betterhelp.com/altereagle. There's no better time than now to start your mental health journey. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to another episode of my special mini-series based off of my visit to Washington, D.C. this month. A conversation that came up with U.S. Representative Mike Kelly was Marc Fogel. Marc Fogel is an American schoolteacher who was arrested in August of 2021 by Russian authorities for trying to enter Russia with 0.6 ounces, which is 17 grams of medical marijuana. Fogel's from Pennsylvania. He's from Butler, in fact. He attended Indiana University of Pennsylvania. He has been a history teacher at international schools in Colombia, Malaysia, Oman, and Venezuela. He lived and worked in Russia since 2012, teaching at the Anglo-American School of Moscow. In June of 2022, Fogel was convicted of drug trafficking and sentenced to 14 years in prison. In October 2022, he was transferred from a detention center in Moscow to a penal colony where he will serve the remainder of his sentence. A bipartisan group of United States senators, U.S. Representative Mike Kelly from the 16th here in Pennsylvania, and Chris DELUZIO from the 17th, which is Beaver, Northern Allegheny County, both have lobbied for the State Department to designate Fogel as wrongfully detained. This is a very important part of this conversation. Marc is currently incarcerated, and he's not being considered wrongfully detained, which is false imprisonment or unlawful imprisonment, which typically in history will tell us anyone who is deemed as wrongfully detained has a better chance of being released. We're having this conversation, and take some time, listen to this episode. If you are just learning of this case, go online, Google Marc's name, M-A-R-C, Fogel, F-O-G-E-L. Read about Marc, listen about Marc. At the end of this episode, I will be sharing a letter that one of Marc's Russian students wrote to him. On one side is this beautiful map of Europe with each country having its own flag represented. And on the other side is this beautifully written letter. I would love for you all to hear this, as would Mrs. Fogel. She brought it in that day when we sat down, and we were able to talk about who Marc was, who Marc is, and that He's not a bad person. He just made a really bad mistake. Please be sure to check the addresses below for any representatives that we feel we could write to as a community in order to get Marc's conviction changed to wrongfully detained in the hopes that he could possibly be released. If you find it in your hearts to do so, the information is below in the caption. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm Mal Fogel, and I'm here to talk about my son, Marc. I have to say he was just an ordinary child growing up, always good-natured. He had very loyal friends, and his friends in childhood are still his friends today. He was the middle child, and he teased his sisters mercilessly, but he was always pleasant about it. He was always interested in history, particularly the presidents. And if you asked him today who ran in 1932, I'm sure he could tell you. But he was always very interested and wanted to know as much as he could about his heritage. His parents on his father's side were French, German, English, Irish, just a melting pot. My parents both came from a small town in Italy, and Marc visited that town many, many times. He was interested in learning the language, and he did something with Duolingo, but mostly when he went into the village, he learned to speak conversational Italian. He got to know a lot of the people in the village, and my mother's house is still standing. It is the oldest house in the village. It sits on the piazza right next to the church, and it is a historical landmark. They don't allow anybody to change the outside of the house, although the inside the house has been remodeled. My father's house was a monastery, and it was a huge, huge place. And they said my grandfather went to Luxembourg to get the marble for the steps going up to the house. And when we visited there, it had a huge balcony the whole way around the house. Not around the house, but around the front of the house. The balcony was covered with English ivy, arches of English ivy, and pot after pot of red carnations. It was just a beautiful, beautiful place. That house was completely destroyed by the earthquake. The only thing left standing was the balcony. And my cousins who lived there were killed in the earthquake.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So anyway, Marc found himself going back to that village as often as he could. And when he taught in Russia, it wasn't that hard to get to Italy when he had long weekends. And in fact, his idea was to buy some kind of property in that village. The village itself is in the province of Abruzzo, it has a national park. It has the Gran Sasso skating, or ice skating and skiing. It's up in the mountains, and we were there the end of May, and there was still snow on the peaks. But the village itself sits in like a little bowl. It's just a beautiful little town. And Marc took his students there. They always went on field trips, and they were to set up field trips. So he took them there the first year, and the next year, the next class wanted to go. The next year, the third class wanted to go. After the fourth year, the school clamped down and said they have to go somewhere different.
Yeah.
But when they were in the village, the ladies showed them how to make pasta. Marc said they had their hairnets and their gloves on, and they were doing this outdoors. Then they showed them how to make pork sausage. And the kids, of course, kids got to eat it, and they loved it. But the fourth year, they got the reputation was there, and so by the fourth year, the school administration said you have to take them somewhere different.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was a wonderful experience, and the last time they went was right after the earthquake. They had a very severe earthquake in that town, and the kids helped move rocks, painted fences, and just did what seniors can do. They couldn't do really heavy lifting, but they tried, and the whole village fell in love with them. And Marco was known as Marco, and everybody wanted to see where Marco was. But it was a wonderful experience for all of them, I think. After that, I don't remember where he took his students after those 3 years, but it was a memorable experience for all of them, I think.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
What a beautiful story. And he really sounds like a remarkable person. And that's why we wanted to sit down and talk about Marc today.
He was an ordinary kid. He wasn't an extra super smart student. He was average all the way around. He loved sports, and he was always a little better than average at sports. Just baseball, and they played a lot of soccer. He was trying to get everybody interested in soccer because that was the coming thing. He had really loyal friends. I can't express enough how loyal his friends have been to him through all of this and doing whatever they can do. And he was always interested in the families of his friends. I guess he was really interested in genealogy as much as he was interested in history. But he did love history, and when he graduated from IUP, he did his student teaching in London. And I think that's what caused him to want to teach overseas. So when he graduated, the first year he taught in Colombia, he taught in Venezuela, different countries in South America, and he learned the language very well. And that helped him with his Italian language because there's a similarity. Mm-hmm. And so while he doesn't speak extremely good Italian, he can make himself understood. And he's always trying. And then after he went to Venezuela, or I think his last teaching job in South America was in Venezuela, and we visited him in all of the places where he visited, where he taught. And then he was married, and Jane, his wife, didn't have her teaching credentials, so she went back to Slippery Rock and got those so they could both teach overseas. So Marc went to Malaysia, and he taught in Oman, and in that general area, he went from different schools, and Jane joined him there, and they were married in Malaysia, and she got a job at the same school. And after they were married, they had both their sons were born there. I think they thought it was a great experience. And I think that Marc and Jane both loved Oman. They did a lot of traveling from there. So they really had all kinds of exotic vacations. They went to Africa, and
they've been to a lot of places, it sounds.
They've been to a lot of places. And the boys just seemed to relish it. They were, always, I don't think they ever complained about where they had to go. It was always a new experience.
That's a really valuable, I can't say this word for some reason, experience for them to have as young adults. And I know that one of his sons is sort of following in his footsteps, like teaching abroad. So
he's teaching in Mexico, although I think he's kind of ready to come back because he now has a girlfriend in Pittsburgh, and that's sort of a drawing.
How has your contact with Marc been?
We hear from him almost every week. if I don't hear from him, one of his sisters or one of his children or wife, somebody hears from him, and then we relay the messages. He has called me almost every Monday, and he likes to call on Monday so I can give him all the reports of the sports games that were played over the weekend, especially the Steelers. And I have the Eagle by that time, and I just almost read him the whole sports page, not word for word, but we cover it pretty much.
I know our sports guys are going to love hearing that.
He definitely, that's the thing he loves the most, and he's always interested in what the Butler High School teams are doing. And I told him about the swimmers and the runners that we have, pretty good. But he has always kept an interest in the local, in the local scene.
Well, because with the time difference, it's an 8-hour time
About 8
difference.
hours.
8 hours,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Mm-hmm. Is he usually able to kind of contact you at the same time consistently?
He calls me usually on Monday mornings. Usually it's his dinner time. Most of the people in that colony are Russian, but they have a smattering of English. All of them, he said, were interested in learning English. So he started a class. I think he had 12 men in the class, and that went on probably for several months. And then the higher-ups decided that was not a good idea. He has still tried to teach them some things. If they ask a question, he'll answer in English. He doesn't really know Russian, but he probably knows enough of it to and with body language, to get along. And he said at the beginning, I know he thought the food was terrible. He had cabbage and potatoes almost every day, which he didn't like.
Nope.
But you have to eat what you.
I imagine even if you did like cabbage and potatoes, after having it every day for a while,
right.
Maybe.
Right. But anyway, I think that's gotten better. Some people send packages, and I know the last time I talked to him, somebody said somebody had sent one of the inmates dried tomatoes. And so they always go to Mark because he's a pretty good cook. And they decided they were going to do something with these dried tomatoes. So I guess he put water on them. And, I don't know. He made some kind of a sauce with garlic powder and onion powder. I don't know what, but they all liked it. I think he tries to make the best of the situation and not think too much, because I know over the holidays I could sense a difference in his answers and stuff. I think it was really hard for him to have another holiday without his family, and he misses the boys. It's like a never-ending nightmare because you can't do anything without stopping and thinking about Mark. Anyway, he never complains. I can't say that he ever complains. He doesn't want you to ask any questions. And when we talk, he just wants us to talk and tell him what's going on.
I think hearing your voice, hearing the voice of his sisters and his wife and his sons is probably very therapeutic for him, just hearing your voices.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That connection.
And you can't tell him anything that is uninteresting. He just, he wants to hear everything.
Wants to hear it all.
Yeah. And, he says, write to the politicians, he said, I have to get out of here. And we have done as much, I think, as we can do, and all the local congressmen have been very, very helpful,
very supportive. So that's kind of let's talk about that. The actions that the community can take, local representatives can continue to push for Mark's case. So you said to me, asking our listeners if you can put time into your day here to write to our local politicians, the Secretary of State, to Biden himself, Fetterman, DELUZIO, Mike Kelly.
Right. And, somebody told us, I don't know if this is true or not, but they said even if they don't read your letters, which they probably don't, but even if they don't read them, they keep account of how many letters they're getting about certain subjects. So it's still useful to do that.
It's so interesting that you just said that, because I had that same thought.
Mm-hmm.
There's that saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah. They pay attention to that. Now, we have never heard from the State Department or Biden or anybody directly. I know that they have contacted Paul Whelan. They've actually talked to him on the phone. Of course, he's been there for 5 years.
Yep, 5 years, yeah.
Yeah, and but we have never heard anything directly from them. My daughters have been down to the State Department and talked to people working in there. They just got the feeling that they're not really pushing very hard. He's not a known person. And it's just so aggravating to think that they wouldn't pay as much attention to him as they did to Brittany Griner. And, that case happened shortly after Mark, and it was almost similar. There were no victims in these crimes, victimless crimes. How they did it, I don't know, maybe because she was such a popular figure. And Biden said from the outset, he says, we're going to get her home. And she was pleaded guilty, went on trial. She got a sentence, I think, of 10 years, 9 or 10 years. Mark's sentence was 14 years. And Mark also appealed it, and they refused to hear the appeal.
Okay.
So,
but wrongfully detained was something we discussed as well.
Right.
And trying to get some answers there for you for sure. Whether or not he could still be released without that wrongfully detained.
Yeah. And I don't know that. I don't know if you have to absolutely have that exclusion.
I spoke to someone yesterday in D.C., and we are getting to the bottom of that for you. So we are trying to find that answer out for you.
I know. I think they've tried before, and they kind of skirt around it.
Well,
I don't know if there's something we don't know that would exclude him from that. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
I'm going to continue to follow up on this, and we're going to just continue to push it to get the answer.
That's
because you have to understand something about me. I am someone who I will try again until I absolutely have nothing left in the tank. And I don't think I'm really going to run out of any gas soon with this, because you are correct in it's a victimless crime. And we're saying, I'm just saying that from that's my perspective, right? Mm-hmm. That is I'm not saying that if anyone sees it a different way that might be listening, that is how I feel about the situation. And hearing everything that Mark has done in the world as an educator and his passion for that, one of the greatest things that we can have these days are educators. We can have the people who are, we need them. And hearing your story. So, we're asking anyone who's listening, especially people in our community, please take the time to sit down, write a letter to our local representatives, politicians, Secretary of State. That's kind of what we're talking about. But with the community also, what can they do to help boost morale and support for you as a family? Other than writing into the powers that be, what else can they do for you and your family?
I don't know. I really don't know what you can do. My neighbors, my neighborhood, everybody has been wonderful. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I wrote to Nancy Pelosi. I wrote to the president. I wrote to Blinken. I don't know if it's done any good. I told Nancy Pelosi about the Italian experience because it happens that her family came from that same region. And after the earthquake, the grade school had been demolished, and she went there and dedicated the new building. And I think I'm not sure of this, but I think Mark said there's a plaque telling about that incident. I was hoping maybe I'd get a reply from her. This friend of ours, this Linda Eisman, or Vicky Eisman rather, said that they were going to hand deliver the letter. So whether that happened, I don't know.
Mark taught a lot of diplomats' children in his time abroad.
Yes.
Have you been in contact with any of those people? Has anyone been in contact with them, and are they helpful in advocating for Mark?
Michael McFall, particularly, he was the ambassador to Russia, and Mark and Jane knew him personally, and he has done everything he can to help Mark. And Mark did have his son as a student. When we had the rally in July in Washington, D.C., Cole is his name, Cole McFall, came to the rally, and he spoke to us and told us about Mark and how much he liked Mark. And there were several other students, and then there's a group of students who are making a documentary. They're from Chapman College in California, and I guess it is well known for its filmmaking classes. So they are making this documentary. They came to our house and got what information they could and got pictures. It's part of their graduation, some of their final working for graduation, but they're supposed to be released in May. They said they were going to try to get it on YouTube. I know that it's almost finished.
Wow.
Several of the students were Mark's students, and they also told us that everybody wanted to get in his class, and it filled up so fast that some of them couldn't get in because they heard Mark had, I know when I visited his class, he taught in Winchester Thurston in Pittsburgh for a while, and I went to his classroom, and he had these huge pictures, just newspaper pictures of Nehru and different political figures in the world, and he just had torn them out of the newspaper and pasted them up on the wall, ragged edges and all. Just really messy.
I like that.
Really messy. But he had them all up there, and I think they discussed world problems even when it was not even in the cards. When they were doing some other kind of a lesson, I think he always brought in the current events. I know when we had the rally, the head of Winchester Thurston came to the rally, and so did Dr. Driscoll from IUP. Has been just so supportive, really interested in trying to get something done. He has been very, very active.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Local members of Congress, senators from across the country we've spoken about briefly, have advocated for Mark and his safe return and his wrongfully detained status. How do you feel that this has helped Mark's case, or what could these offices be advocating next for Mark? Any thoughts on that?
Well, it seems that getting that designation should be number one. And why they're not doing it, I don't know. But I think once we have that, I think they could probably move forward a little more.
I agree. Okay.
If he doesn't get that, we said maybe we should use the angle of humanitarian because Mark is in pain. We have been able to send him ibuprofen and Tylenol and that sort of thing. We sent him vitamins. We sent him vitamin D and multivitamins and that kind of stuff. But it just takes the edge off the pain, and it is real. He has been at my house for dinner, and in the middle of dinner would have to get off of that hard chair and go lie on the floor in the living room. Mm-hmm. He could not sit through dinner, which was maybe an hour. He had to get relief. And when he drove, he has a home in Oakmont. When he drove to Butler to our house, he would always had rolled up towels or some kind of support behind his back, mostly just rolled up towels. Mm. And he would always come in and he'd have to lie down. He couldn't sit in a soft chair, he can't sit in a hard chair. He has to either stand or lie down to be comfortable. And when he was teaching, I think they gave him, I'm pretty sure he had a standing desk where he could lean back on a chair, but he didn't have to sit.
Which is much better if you do have
a
back injury. Yes.
Yeah, that's what he had.
So when we talk about being in your shoes, You know, your hope is to have him home safely with you and your family soon. Is there any other way your family is trying to raise awareness for Marc's case that previously has not been done yet? Anything new?
We all pray a lot. We're Catholic, and at 9:30 on EWTN, which is a Catholic channel on TV, they say a rosary at 9:30 every night. And my three sisters and I simultaneously say that rosary every night in different areas. We're all in our own home, but that's an everyday occurrence. I told Marc about that.
That's really powerful.
Well, you know, it makes you feel a little better. It makes you feel like you're doing something. But we've been doing that for, you know, as long as Marc's been away.
I mean, that's a huge part of this, is finding how you can go on, but not giving up hope.
Well, you can't, you know,
No.
you can't give hope. You have to put your trust in God. I really think that's the only thing that's going to help Marc.
You go ahead.
I think something will happen. I wrote to Putin. Anyway, I wrote to him and I said, I saw where you made the sign of the cross. I says, we worship the same God. And I'm hoping that he's not going to read the letter, but there has to be something somehow to reach him
Yeah, you do wonder how do you get
through.
How do you get through? How do we find a way to connect as humans?
Right.
Everything has
Everybody
become...
wants the same thing. They want safety, and they want to be able to eat, and they want to be able to worship, do whatever, you know.
Yes.
I mean, humans are the same all over.
So with Evan Gerskevich's parents at the State of the Union last week, do you believe that Marc could be sent home with Evan? I know that has come up, and that Putin was in an interview with Tucker Carlson that he, quote, does know why Evan is here and wants to send him back. So I know right now there's sort of this thought, is there a possibility that we want to try to get Marc sent home with Evan?
The only thing is that he doesn't have that designation.
Yes.
I think they were picked up as spies, possible spies, he and Whalen, where Marc, you know, it was a totally different. So I don't know if they all have to have the same classification
Yes.
to be tried together.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I just hope we'll either include him or a separate one-on-one swap of some kind. I don't know how many Russian prisoners we have, if there's anybody that they would trade. It seems terrible to trade human beings, but that's what it is. Having a different designation would keep him on a separate path. I don't know.
You know, and we are trying to get to the bottom of that and find out that answer for you.
Yeah.
I do think that you're right in your very strong convictions that you think that could be the change that needs to happen. So as much as we can, just keep pushing forward with that and trying to make that happen for Marc and for your family.
Yeah, but I know when Marc heard about Brittany Griner and he heard that she was going to be released, he thought he'd be on that plane with her. He really thought, you know, there's similar cases, they're going to put me on the plane with her. Well, of course, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But he was sure that would happen.
Well, I'm so sorry that didn't happen, and we just have to continue.
I was hoping that Brittany Griner would say something in Marc's defense. I was hoping that she would say something in his defense, but they have tried to contact her. I don't know who they are, but
You've heard that someone has tried to contact her to try to. Okay. Okay.
As far as the Whalens, I don't know if anybody's tried to do anything with them or not.
Well, there's power in numbers, and I think that we are perhaps moving on to some sort of a thought process. Maybe that will help. Maybe that's something that's possible.
Some kind of a climax or something.
Something.
Yeah.
Well, we definitely want to keep Marc's name out. That's why we're sitting down today. You brought a very well written letter from one of his students that I will, sit down and take time to record that, and I'm going to share that with our audience.
And there are many of them.
And you said
I don't have them. I don't have them. His wife has them, but this was particularly beautiful.
Yeah, very special.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so she wanted me to read it, so I've kept it.
So I'm going to share that letter in its entirety because I really do think that it says a lot about Marc as a teacher,
Yes.
as a person, the impact he has made on so many students and the possibilities. I do believe that there's a lot of possibility in us having this conversation. I like to put that out and give you as much positivity as I can in this situation.
Well, you've been great. I just keep hoping that my biggest fear is that they'll move him, because he had been moved a number of times until he settled in this particular colony. And it's I don't know if it's in Siberia, but very close. There is, it seems to be quite a contingent of employees. And there is a building on the premises that they use as a church. It's just a building, Marc says, with an altar and candles. That's there are no pews. And so sometimes he thinks around the end of each month, they allow this Russian Orthodox priest to come and do a service. And Marc goes to those. He can walk to that building. And he's met some of the people there. And there's a woman there who always goes up to Marc and greets him. And a few times she's brought him, once she brought him an apple, another time she brought him a little cake, another time she brought him a tangerine. And he found out that she's a medical doctor. The last time she saw him, she gave him a tube of something like Bengay, some kind of a muscle.
Like an ointment.
An ointment,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So she knows that he's limping.
That he's in pain.
Yeah, and but she happens to be a medical doctor. I thought how wonderful that is, because she can at least see him, and sometimes you can tell from people's expressions or eyes if they're not feeling well, you know. Mm-hmm. But he said she's always there.
So he is being looked after.
Yeah,
and
in strange ways.
In strange ways. So I think, to your testament of prayer, like a lot of times our prayers get answered in different ways, right? Perhaps right now
we have to have faith. We have to have faith.
We have to keep faith in this process and know that for now he's safe where he is right now.
I think he is. I think he is. I think he's actually made friends in the place. I did want to say one thing about how hard it is for him to get reading material, because there's not much else to do. He does exercises all the time because that's the only thing that gives him relief, his back pain. And he does a lot of those, but he likes to read, and they would not allow any books to be sent there. They have to be by a Russian author, or they have to be approved by someone. And my younger daughter happened to know somebody who has a bookstore, and she was able to send him some books, but she sent him a lot of the classics that they would approve.
You said Moby Dick was one.
Moby
and
Dick
he's read that
one.
3 times?
He's read it 3 times, he said. Each time, he says he gets something else out of it.
Yeah, actually, it kind of makes me want to read it full through, right?
Yeah, and Anna Karenina was another one. Dr. Zhivago was another one. So
not easy reads. Like, those are tough.
No, but I
they're
think
very wonderful.
They were approved. They were approved because they're Russian authors. And but I think that's been a long time since he got new books to read.
Yeah, so if there is anyone out there who's well-versed in Russian literature and possibly something you can share with us that we could get to Marc, that would be appreciated.
Even titles of books that they would approve of.
Exactly. That's sort of what I'm thinking, that you could relay to him on the phone, and then he could get it quicker.
maybe
than us sending it. Because like you said, when they send packages, it takes a long time for him to get them because they have to approve
they told
everything.
him he has boxes of cards, Christmas cards. They have not given them to him yet, and they were mailed probably a month before Christmas. But he said that they have to go through every bit of mail that he gets. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know, you would think they would give it to him in spurts, but I don't know if he's gotten any now. If he calls this coming Monday, I'll ask him if he has gotten any of the, but he had tons of cards sent to him.
But I don't think he can keep them.
He can't, whatever mail he has gotten, I don't know what kind of mail. He's gotten a little bit of mail. And they gave it to him to read, and then they took it back. He wasn't allowed to keep it.
Yes, that is my understanding. And that makes the situation a little harder because a lot of that stuff, when someone writes you a letter or gives you a card, sometimes just pulling that out, right? And having that there as a reminder that you're not alone and that you're supported and that you're loved and appreciated. It's helpful. So it's great that you're able to contact him or that you are in contact with him on a weekly basis.
Yes.
And just taking those moments and just keeping them very special and close to your heart.
And my younger daughter had suggested anybody writing him a card could put the lyrics of songs in them.
Okay.
The artists that he liked.
So who are his favorite artists?
Oh, well, of course, the Beatles.
I was just going to say the Beatles, actually. That just popped in my head.
I'm not up on those, but I remember there was a song, Barbara Ann.
Every time yes.
we went on, every time we drove to East Brady, they were in the backseat singing that song. But I think different people have done that. And if he could get those, he would get such a kick out of that.
Do you hear that, listeners? We need you to start writing down some lyrics for Mark. Send them to Mark.
Of that era, he's 62, so anybody that age knows what they liked when they were in their teen years.
Yes.
And I'm not familiar with them, but there are some that come to mind. But I think he would really get a big kick out of seeing lyrics.
All right, you heard it. You heard it here.
Right. But Mark always sang, and he has a terrible voice. But he always insisted on singing the lyrics.
And you're like, well, maybe just leave it to the Beatles.
Yeah.
When someone asks you if they're singing a song and you ask them, I don't know if you've ever heard this before, it's a joke. But if someone is singing badly, typically what you could say is, who sings that again? And when they tell you, say, let's keep it that way. There's like there's like the joke of, why don't we keep it that way?
Right. Yeah.
But it's lovely to hear someone who's so passionate about a song. And trust me, I will sing. You sing by yourself in the car and you think you sound great.
Yeah.
And then you turn the radio down and you're like, no. Doesn't sound like Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like the Beatles.
Well,
so
we always sang, and my family lived in East Brady, and that was a Sunday trip. And from the time they were kids, the three of them in the back seat would try to sing. And Mark, Lisa doesn't have a good voice. Ann has a very good voice. She carried the load. But Mark has a terrible voice. But
I love that.
He always sang louder than anybody, but it was just a routine that we had.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And, I just want to say how lovely it was to meet you, to sit down with you. Hopefully this isn't our last time sitting down and talking to one another. I know a lot of people are looking forward to hearing your voice and hearing you talk about Mark.
Well, I hope it's not boring, but the one thing I want to stress is that we have to get the politicians to do something. And anything that we can do along those lines is the only way we can help. It's the only way. And I just want to say how important it is that he is included in any kind of a transfer or, a trade.
Negotiation.
Because I have not heard his voice or his name mentioned very often in the national news. They always mention Gerskovich and Whalen, and rarely do they mention Mark. Rarely. And I don't know why that is. It's like he doesn't exist. So anything that we can do to bring his name out, and that's why I'm doing this, and I appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate what the Butler Eagle has done. They've been so supportive of our family and our story. And the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette also has been very good with their editorials, and the politicians. We don't have any complaints about the local leaders. They have done their best. And as far as the general population, all we can do is write to our congressman, write to the State Department. You can always get those addresses on the internet.
I will share in the caption of this, of the YouTube video and all of the episodes, that do post, where that information is, or that information directly. I
think that would be great if we could even put Jill Biden's address, because she was a teacher, and I was hoping that some of the teachers out there would write to her.
Okay.
Because I think that she might have some sympathy.
That's someone who could really make a difference. So stay positive when it comes to the possibilities of actually writing letters and reaching out to the people that we need to get in touch with. So
there is nothing else that I know of to do.
All right. Well, you got it.
Well,
let's keep his name. Let's get his name out there.
Right. He's not a criminal. He's not a criminal. It was a mistake that he made. Nobody was hurt by it except him, his family. Thank you for your help.
You're so wonderful. Yes, of course. Of course. Dear Mr. Fogel, as one brave Afro-American doctor, priest, and a speaker said, I have a dream, and I do have a dream for you to continue bringing joy and happiness, as well as wisdom, to the lives of as many people as possible. You are not only a history, geography, and political sciences teacher, but you are a mentor and an idol for many people, both students and teachers. The insightful, judicious, sagacious wisdom was always pouring out of your cluttered room, of course. Say that line again. The insightful, judicious, sagacious wisdom was always pouring out of your cluttered room, of course, mixed with a healthy dose of humor and sometimes with an overdose of unreasonable optimism based on lack of objectivity, verifiable evidence. Either way, every time I would want any type of elucidation, enlightenment, or just an interesting encounter, I knew that your room is the one to visit. And for this, I thank you. I always liked Mr. Coffee because whenever I looked at him, I saw myself in the future. So many characteristics, opinions, aspects such as sense of humor were so similar, and that is why I was heartbroken to see him leave. Nevertheless, you taught me, or at least reinforced my awareness of the fact that similarities are not the only factor that builds and determines a relationship, but a constructive, two-way dialogue based on strong personal beliefs. Basically, the ability to talk with other people, to talk honestly, transparently, and with honor. Even though we do have our differences, through this year, I have gained the utmost respect for you as a teacher and as a person. Although you cannot deny that I am the only loquacious person in there. Of course, I could list the plethora of exercises that you have presented us with. I'm going to go back. Even though we do have our differences, through this year, I have gained the utmost respect for you as a teacher and as a person. Although you cannot deny that I am the only loquacious person in here. Of course, I could list the plethora of exercises that you have presented us with, although it would be of no importance to any of us. All including Tsar Nicholas the Bloody, Stalin, Gorbachev, Hitler, Nasser, Mussolini portrayed one key concept, The concept of unwillingness to understand, talk, explain, and cooperate for a greater good of the society as a whole. And you were one of the shining, lighting beacons of hope and wisdom this year that cherished the virtues of teamwork, talking, and considerate, open-minded understanding of others. With this post-World War II Cold War map of Europe, I wish the best to you, Mr. Fogel, to your family, and to your everlasting brilliant career. May this not only remind you about Jan the Polish guy, but also about the AAS, your years in here, as well as your enormously positive impact on the community, based on the values that you have defended and spread. I think that to conclude this chapter, I would like to thank you for everything that you have done for me as a person and for our history class. As one teddy bear said, do what you can with what you have where you are. This is what we did in this difficult pandemic period, and I am grateful that I had the ability to get to know you and to be in the same class with you. Thank you. Hasta la pizza, Mr. Fogel. May the power of loquaciousness always be with you.
Thank you for tuning in to Alter Eagle. Join me every Monday for a new episode.
Be sure and click the link in bio for 10% off your first month of therapy through BetterHelp. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and follow us on Instagram at Alter Eagle Podcast. Until next time, stay safe, stay hopeful, stay kind.